Hey team, welcome to Colbyashi Maru, the show where devs all over the world boldly face off against the most logical tools on the web. I'm Colby Fayok, your space jelly commander and host of today's challenge. Today we have Pavithra Kodmad. PK is a tech enthusiast and front-end developer at Atlassian. So let's bring her in.
Hey.
Hey PK, do you want to give yourself a quick intro and is there anything else you'd like to add?
Hi everyone, I'm PK. I am a front-end developer and I've been in the industry for quite a while and right now I work at Atlassian. I am usually on Twitter or something trying to work on my side projects or just see what's happening on tech Twitter. That's about me, I guess. I
Awesome.
live in Sydney, so if anyone didn't know.
Yeah, so it's super early for you, and I appreciate you, getting up early just for Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But if you're
I'm
new
a
to
morning
Kobayashi,
person. Yeah,
are you?
yeah,
I'm not so much a morning person. I need a couple coffees in me before I'm productive.
yeah. I my energy drops like after 5 p.m. So this is good.
Awesome. Well, if you're new to Kobayashi Maru, our guests will have 1 hour to complete their challenge. Through that time, PK will try to talk out loud as she's working through that challenge. I'll also be asking questions along the way. So if you have a question, make sure to send it over in the chat and I'll ask it over. So today, PK will face off against building a Chrome extension that shows Slack message previews. If she doesn't finish the challenge, all is not lost. We'll see if we have a little bit of extra time. Otherwise, we'll chat about what the next steps would be and see what the completed demo would actually look like. So, PK, before we actually dive in, do you want to just give a little quick overview about what the tools you'll be using today are?
Yeah. So this is what we're building is a Chrome extension. So the problem that I tried to solve was every time me and my product manager went through Jira tickets to triage them or whatever, there would always be some link to some Slack discussion that some developers had, and they uh, put their thoughts in there, or they didn't copy the whole thing, and they said like refer to the Slack link. So we'd struggle every time, like he'd have to log into Slack and then he would lose the link or whatnot. Uh, and so out of that, I thought maybe I could like solve this through an extension because every time switching from the browser to the app was not so good. So then that's when I dove into Chrome extensions, and I hadn't built one in a long time, and I saw it had changed quite a bit. Uh, and I struggled for like a month because I only spend an hour or two a week on this, and I struggled for like a month trying to piece this together. Which is why I thought that maybe I could make a resource on this, and I got really passionate about it. And that's when I got a chance to come on this show, and I thought, yeah, this is what I'm working on right now, so I can show this off. Uh, yeah, so that's how I am here, like teaching you how to make a Chrome extension. And yeah, I decided to call it Slack over, and I have a working version of it. It's a working version and not a polished version. I tweeted about it a few days ago and it's still there. And I can show you how it works, and we can start building it from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. And before we dig into that, I just want to say hey to Alex Strauss, who just raided with a party of 16. Welcome, everybody.
Aw.
I hope everybody was having a fun time over at the component carousel. But yeah, I'll switch over to show your screen and you can
Mhm.
feel free to have at it. And maybe once you give your quick introduction, then I can actually start the timer. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
The timer thing I'm a little stressed by, but let's see.
Sounds good.
Okay. Uh, Yeah, so this is my extension. It does not have a logo yet. So what it does when you click on this, so it's an extension that I've pinned onto onto my browser, and when you click on it, it basically like opens up. View like this right now. So what this says is it's logged in to my Egghead. I'm using their platform as a test bed because it
Nice.
has tons of different messages that I can kind of preview. So it's logged into Egghead now. So if I clear it, then you see this kind of button which allows you to add it to Slack. So how that works is when I click on this very slowly, it launches its own browser window that you will see hopefully in a second.
So are you
Yeah,
also working with the Slack API then too for this extension?
yes. So the whole extension is basically just Chrome extension and Slack API, and I use GitHub to demo like where the extension could come in use for you. The Slack API and the Chrome extension are connected together through the OAuth protocol, which is pretty standard in the industry. Okay.
For sure.
One second. Yeah, it's pretty standard in the industry, and yeah, it's basically a two handshake protocol. Like you send a message to Slack, then Slack sends back a message to you with a code, and you send back the message with that code, and Slack knows from the two-factor authentication that you are the person you say you are. So we are going to implement that today, so that should be fun. Uh, I did, yeah, I got plenty of practice doing that for this Slack extension. Um, I am
That's
having
awesome.
some issues here. Yeah, well, live
I wonder
preview, right?
if right. You think do you need to like open
But
up another instance of the extension or something? Maybe.
but I think it should still be working from my previous login. And
Okay.
yeah, it'll kind of work
Oh
this
yeah.
way.
There
So
we go.
yeah, so you have any kind of Slack link, you got to log in to that. So that's the prerequisite. So you install the Chrome extension, then you log into Slack with the instance that you want to log in, and then you hover over stuff. You can also click, so it doesn't. I try to work on it such that it doesn't remove from the accessibility of the link itself. So if the link is in focus, you'll see a short thing there, and this can be extended. My plan is to like extend this to show the whole conversation. If it's a thread, we can have a tooltip that like scrolls through stuff,
That's pretty
and
neat.
you should be able to log into multiple instances. That's the dream. I hope I'll get there someday. But right now, this is what's
Yep.
working for me.
No, I think that's awesome. It's a lot of interesting pieces that put that together.
Yeah. I'm pretty proud of it. It took me a while
Yeah.
to get here. Yeah, so that's what we'll try to implement today. So the first step is we'll try to implement the OAuth authentication between the two pieces, and then we'll try to actually access uh, a Slack message. I already have written a Lambda for it, so you can see how the Lambda will work with this and all that jazz. Yeah. If we don't finish, I'll just go through the code and show you how
Awesome.
the whole thing works. Yeah.
That sounds great. Cool.
Mhm.
Well, if you're ready, I'm ready, and I can get the timer started. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go. 3, 2, 1,
Oh
go.
my god. Okay.
No pressure.
I will have to open a new window. Okay. Cool. Getting in. Okay. So I'm getting in my VS Code here. Yeah. So the timer will be running.
Yep. And there'll be a few at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes. There'll be a little
Okay. Okay.
notification.
Okay. Okay. Um, a second. And cool. So let's start with like a blank slate here. I just have, can you see my editor? I named the folder
Yep.
Slack message preview, and we'll start from scratch for a Chrome extension. So I'm not using any starters here. I usually find them really confusing to start with because once you use like one of the React starters or Vue starters for Chrome extension, you usually it obscures the structure of that extension. So if you want to learn how an extension works from beginning, I started from scratch, and you can add in any technology you want incrementally, I feel. So yeah, so any Chrome extension starts with manifest.json. So manifest.json is like to a Chrome extension what package.json is to npm. I At least that's how I look at it. So this is the main file which allows you to construct and configure your Chrome extension. Uh, when you upload an extension onto your browser, it should have a manifest.json on the folder, else nothing will work. So what does this manifest.json have? It has standard stuff like name, no, which should be name.
Jason is so
So let's
finicky.
Yeah, it is. And plus, I don't have prettier configured for this, I think. So Slack message preview, let's call it. Oh, Oreo. Then we can give a description, which is something like done on a Twitch stream. So people know not to use it. Then you can give it your own version, so which is all like standard configuration stuff. If you've used any any kind of custom plugin thing of anybody's, they'll ask you for a version, and you can update this version and stuff. You'll see this when you upload the Chrome extension. The next thing that you put in a manifest JSON is manifest version. So this version is not to confuse it with the other one. This version is your version of Chrome API that you'll be using in this extension. So Chrome has gone through the Chrome extension API has gone through a bit of iteration, and we are on the latest one, which is 3. Uh, you'll see that most of the apps in the wild are version 2, but 3 is totally backward compatible with 2. And I don't think we need to dive into that much depth of what's the difference between the versions. We'll just use all the API that's available and described in the documentation, and say that we are using manifest version 3. I think the only big difference here is that the in Chrome extension, you can have something called a background JS, and in version 2, it was this sustaining thing that sustained through multiple tabs. But on version 3, it's a service worker, and it kind of behaves like something
Mm,
that wakes up on events. So that's, I
interesting.
think, the biggest difference. So if you had a version 2 background that kind of depended on something running continuously in the background, that would break, I think. I don't have that experience of going from version 2 to 3. Um, so other than this, you can also configure the, I feel, the 3 basic uh, like what do you call, pillars of a Chrome extension. So a Chrome extension is basically when you install a Chrome extension, you click on an extension, and whatever pops up is an action that you perform on that. So you can define that here in an action object here. We'll get into that soon. Then you can have your background. So this is for all the API calls you make, and yeah, mostly API calls and all the heavy lifting in JavaScript that you want to do, because whatever you do in your action or in your content scripts, which is the other pillar. Um, so whatever you do in these two things are on the front end. They take up resources from the page and from the browser tab, and they can rack up memory there. But the background is a service worker, like I told you, and that'll work in the background truly, and hopefully not cause too much of a performance bottleneck for the actual thing that's working on the browser
So
because of
is it almost like the background is your back end, like a node
yeah,
script, and then
yeah,
content script
yeah.
is your front end?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not. It uses JavaScript, not Node. But still, you can treat it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah.
I think any kind of heavy lifting you want to do is you want to send a message from your pop-up or your content script onto the background. Background will listen to this message as it only wakes up during events. And you can send back things from the background after you process them. You can send them back asynchronously also. So it doesn't have to be a synchronous conversation between them. So you define all of these things here, and then you can also define, you need to define permissions. So permissions is pretty simple in the sense that it's just an array of strings that you give in here. Rest are all objects. Yeah, so there's bunch of other things also, like which URLs your extension has access to, and yeah, what other actions you can do and things like that. But I don't think we need all of that right now, and it'll just complicate things. We'll use these
Yeah.
things as we go, I feel. Yeah, so this is basically your manifest JSON, which is the most critical thing for a Chrome extension. And from here on, I think first we can work on building that pop-up for your extension. And once we have a little bit of the pop-up HTML in, we can test the first version of the extension, I think. We can technically upload this extension now that it has a manifest JSON, but nothing will work.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So let's not use all of those now. So let's start with an action. So action here is when you actually click on your extension, and that'll work somewhat like this. So it's called. This is all like proprietary how Chrome extension has. So yeah, I don't ask me the meaning of these things, but yeah, this is how you define stuff. So you say default pop-up, and that's the little pop-up that'll show up. I'll show that to you now. And here you give it an HTML file. It doesn't have to be called pop-up HTML. I called it that, but it's conventional to call it that way.
Makes sense.
So I just put in now a pop-up HTML here, and we just begin from scratch. So it's a normal HTML. There's not much restrictions to what you can do here. So you can have your normal tags, have head, uh, body, whatever. Yeah. So what we're going to do in this pop-up is you can have like script tags. So I'll just use it here because I'll just put one at the bottom of the body because I don't want to, yeah, mess with like the document load and stuff. So I'll call this popup.js, and I'll have to define that and stuff. So basically, something like this will work pretty okay. Um, so in here, pop-up, what I want to do is I want to log into Slack. So I want a button here. I'm not going to. You can add a style. I mean, link style here also. I'm not going to focus so much on styling as much as on the functionality, I think.
I think it makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I'll create a login to Slack button here, and we'll do a login to Slack. Okay. So now I have an HTML. I've connected it to the Chrome extension manifest using this action. Yeah, so we can try uploading this HTML. So let me get this here. So you, one second. Yeah. So this is, you go into Chrome / extensions. So that's how you can upload your local extensions and stuff. And what you do is you can toggle between developer mode on or off. So right now, if you, most of the time it will be in off, and when you switch it on, you'll get these options here: load unpacked, pack extensions, update, and all of that. So we'll be using to test our extension, will be using load unpacked. So you pack an extension before you upload it into the Chrome Web Store, and update will basically update all of the extensions on the page. So first I'll say load unpacked, which will open this for me. And yeah, so that was my old one, and this is the new one that we created just now. It has the manifest JSON and the popup JSON, popup HTML. So if I select that, ooh, required version, it must be between 1 and 4. Oh, so
I
yeah,
wonder if it's
that's
just
an error. Yeah. Should this be a string? Oh, apparently yes. This is a string, but that's a number. This is what I'm talking about. Chrome extension is so finicky to work with.
it's
Um,
interesting.
that yeah, it is like all of this stuff doesn't really have that well. It's not documented that well. I think people just like go ahead with tribal knowledge, which is pretty much what I'm doing, and tribal knowledge that I have gained. Yeah, so let's try it again. Yeah, okay, that worked. So this uploaded our extension here, and yeah, our name, the version number, and the description all pops up here. And what's important is kind of the ID that Chrome gives to you. Yeah, we'll need to use this ID later on to interact with other uh, APIs and stuff like that.
And will that ID be specific to that particular extension, or is that only
Yeah,
for that extent? Like, is it particular to that extension on your machine or anybody's machine?
I think this one is, and when I upload it to the Chrome Web Store, I'll get a different ID. That's what
Okay.
I'm expecting. Um, yeah, but it doesn't really change how many ever times I update it over here. I've been able to use it. Yeah, so we have this. Now we can, oops. Hmm. We can see the extension here in this list over here and Slack message preview. So to get it on your browser, like the workspace, you can pin it and that shows up here. Since I don't have any logo for it, you just have to have uh, some logo on the folder, and I think it'll just pick it up. But I don't have one here. So now I have it here, and it'll show that in the tooltip and all of that. So when I click on this, yeah, that button is
We
coming
got
here
the
because I
button.
didn't style it
Nice.
anyway. Yeah, we have the button show up. So that's all thing that I needed to work with what code I had. Okay, cool. So I click on this, nothing happens right now. So let's make something happen, right? Um, so we can make things happen using the JavaScript here. So that's very old school JS, and it pretty much works like any other web app. Yeah, you can. Yeah, so what people do with all their fancy starter kits and stuff is they basically set up everything in React or any other framework such that the webpack scripts kind of output a folder for you with the manifest JSON, with this HTML and JS and all of that set up. So here I didn't do anything, so we'll just use vanilla JavaScript to get things working. So this is nothing.
And I'm not sure if you
Uh,
heard that beeping, but that means that we're at the 45-minute mark.
okay. uh, so let me just like uh, grab an instance of this button, grab the element of the button. So I'll call
Sounds
it
good.
login to Slack, and then the ancient document get element by ID of login to Slack. I mean, I don't think anybody does this now, but I do. Then we just listen. We add event listener, and we listen to the click of this. And you get an event here, which I don't know, you won't have to use, I think. And I'll alert something. So that'll be the nicest way to show button. Yeah.
I'd be curious how often people try to load something like React or some kind of framework inside of this.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that you do it. It would make your Chrome extension really bulky. You
Yeah.
could, I would say, I don't know. I don't know. Do people like SSR or something? That's what I am planning to do, like for my
Mm.
production version at least. I want. what you want is basically just HTML and CSS here. If you load up all of React, that would be so big, I think. Maybe Preact could
Yeah.
work out. Like, you
Or
wouldn't
maybe
want,
Svelte. Have you used
yeah,
Svelte
something,
before? Yeah.
yeah. I've heard of it. I've not used the latest versions of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the it sounds more lightweight. Uh, this is just, so this screen is just the place where you configure stuff. You don't have to show a lot, and it's not a full-fledged web application like with an SPA and all those things, right? So you don't really need something so complex. Yeah, it's up to you, I guess. Maybe like people do, like if you use
Yeah.
one of the starters, you'll probably do end up um, having React inside of this. uh, yeah, I don't know how much it affects Chrome to have a large extension in there.
Right.
It works. Okay, so once you have that, I kind of update it. So it reloads the app. It kind of shows here. So when I do this, it says reloaded, and it roll has a different version here. So now when I log into Slack, oh yay, I have an alert
Nice.
come up. So that works pretty seamlessly. Okay.
It's a lot
So
more
this
straightforward than I thought to get to that point. Like building a basic Chrome extension. That's pretty awesome.
yeah, so that's your like basic Chrome extensions. This is 101, right? So Chrome extension, your pop up, and get that pop up interactive. So all that works well. So our next step is kind of trying to log into Slack. So that'll be kind of, I think, the meat of what we'll do now. Yeah. So how would you think, if you think of the steps that you need to log into Slack or any other like API, GitHub or anything, it's pretty standard that Chrome extensions will need some kind of authorization because they need to do funky stuff on your page later on. Yeah. So how I would go about it is, I when you click on log into Slack, uh, I would send that message to background JS because I don't want the front end stuck with doing that. And it's also like there's some waiting involved, right? And I don't want the front end to be waiting for all of that. So yeah, let's try to see how like message passing works between the front end and the background JS first, and then we'll bring in the Slack API slowly and try to wire that up. Does that sound fine?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So first, let's see how the background service worker works. Um, so let's configure it in the manifest.json first. Yeah. So I have background. And so what you do here inside this object is you say service worker. Again, don't ask me why the API looks that way. That's how it does. And I'll name this background JS, just like to have semantic familiarity with everything. You can call it whatever you want. Okay, so with this configuration, the when you upload the Chrome extension again, it will know that a service worker will exist with this file. Now I'll use create the background.js this way. Now, the service worker is unique in the sense that it will only wake up to events. So anytime on its own, it won't be doing anything. You can't expect that on the background something will be running all the time. You can't run cron jobs. You will have to send it an event, and it'll just react to that event or action itself. So here, what we want to do is, yeah, we want to listen to a message from the front end. So the front end uses Chrome's API. So the across front end content scripts and background, you can use Chrome's API. All of that will be inside the object called Chrome. Uh, so now Chrome, you can go check out like the documentation on this. There's tons of API residing inside Chrome dot. There's Chrome dot runtime, Chrome dot tabs, Chrome dot storage, and Chrome dot identity. and all these API that live inside the Chrome object. And I won't give you a whole overview of what all is there. I'm just going to use them on as I need, and we'll just talk about the API that I'm using, I guess. Um, yeah, so how do you send a message to any part of Chrome extension, right? So you use something called Chrome.runtime is the API. My autocomplete is not good here. Uh, so yeah, so in Chrome.runtime, you can say send message, which what it does is it basically broadcasts anything that you give here. You can give a string, you can give an object, you can give an array or whatever. So it just takes like one parameter here. So let's say an object, and you can also send a callback here, where you can receive back a response from anybody who has processed this message. So here I can send anything. So let me just send a type. This is something that I have kind of figured out for myself that I can do, because it's a broadcast, and either the content script or background can listen to this message. I need to be able to differentiate it from any other messages that I send. So any message that I send from anywhere, I'll send it with the type, and the type I'll enum it to whatever I want. So right now
Yeah.
we'll just use a string, and
It's good to
I'll
have like a
call it
pattern
awk.
to recognize.
Yeah, this is not something I wish like the extension itself provided different kind of messages, or I don't know, it provided a way to do this, but this is what we have, and this is what I'll use. um yeah, and then there is this part, this callback part. I learned it through a lot of like trial and error of how it works, because you'll see the parameter order is slightly different than what I expected. So basically what I'll expect is a response here, and we can log the response, I guess, for now. Response, cool. Okay, so I send a message from here. Now I want to listen to it here, and that's all you do basically. Uh, this doesn't require any prefacing with any like loaded or whatnot. Though there are events for when the Chrome extension got installed or updated or things like that. But here I'm just going to listen to the actual message that I sent from there. So how you do that is Chrome.runtime again, and on message. That's the event that you want to listen to. And trickily enough, it's not called add event listener, it's called add listener. Uh, yeah, that's what they have. This is what I mean, right? Like when all things I tripped up while making an extension.
Yeah.
You expect it to follow the normal add event listener pattern that you use everywhere in a web app, but yeah,
Not the most
this is.
consistent.
Mhm. Okay, but at least it's all documented. It's all there if
Yeah.
you go and check it out. And there's even a GitHub repository full of like examples, though it didn't have the example I want, which is this OAuth. For no, it has one with GitHub, but yeah, with somebody guiding you, I feel it'll be much easier to
For
understand.
sure.
Let's see. So here again, it we want to listen to the message and basically receive all these parameters, right? The type and this callback and all of that. So how do you do that? This basically in the listener you give an function here, and what does this take? So the first one is the parameters that you send that object with the type OAuth. And funnily enough, the second one, I don't know what it's used for. And third one is the callback that it's expecting. So this also I found out through like trial and error. And yeah, this is what works. So the first one, so I can now say if param dot type equals OAuth, only then perform the whole OAuth flow. And then so console.log. I don't need to log anything here. So and then you can say send response. I don't have. I do not have OAuth yet. Okay, cool. So let's just see how like the background and pop-up kind of interact before we actually get into the meat of the extension, I think. So getting, oh my god, I am not the best at maintaining the split screen. So getting back my extension here. Okay, so let's update it. Okay, so something new you'll see is that it has service worker here. This is because I've configured that manifest.json.
Nice.
So another interesting thing about the whole thing was how do you debug all the stuff, right? So it's not available in your inspect source here, but you would want to put breakpoints and see if you're doing something a little more complex. So what I found out is for different parts of the extension, you have different debug entry points. They will all pull up the Chrome Dev Tools, but it's slightly different, is what I saw. So for the extension itself, you need to right click on the extension and you'll get this context menu and you'll have the inspect pop up here. So that's where the pop up terminology kind of comes from.
I was
So
wondering where the
this,
console log was going to go.
yeah. So it's going to come up here. And yeah, this took me so long to like figure out like where do I debug things. So I was just alerting for a while in the extension. So I thought this could be a nice little pointer of how to debug these things. So very conveniently here you'll see the pop-up HTML and the pop-up JS. And we'll have all of the stuff. You can put breakpoints and you can see that so now when I click log into Slack, it'll hit the breakpoint and then you can like inspect everything. It all works like you would expect. So that's pretty cool. About the background itself, you this is another tricky thing. Like you need to click on this, and that'll open the dev tools for the background. So these are all running in isolated environments. So what the Chrome extension tries to do is to keep the background secure and private and outside of the context of this, so that the background can't really access things in your tab, and neither can the pop-up also. It's only the content scripts which kind of can access the tab, and so they want to run all of this in isolated environments, I think. And so that's why like getting to the debug console of all of these things is slightly different, and they all operate independently.
To prevent
So
people from
again,
doing bad things.
yeah, exactly. Because it does give you like some unlimited access to a customer's instance, right, of a browser. Okay, so yeah, so we have background here, and it's we can like debug the listener and stuff. So this kind of refreshes every time you update the extension. So you need to, this will go stale. So now when I update the extension, this instance of DevTools will go stale and you'll need to like reopen it every time, which is quite annoying to be honest. But that's how it works.
And just so you know, if you missed that beeping noise again, you have 30 minutes remaining.
Awesome. Okay. So that's how you get to there. So let's see if our message passing really works now. So that's the next step we're going to try and test. So what I want is when I log in, okay, that does work. So what happened here is maybe I should do it step by step, right? So that it's more clear. So I'll open the pop-up for pop-up dev tools. So now I had breakpoints there. I hope those work. No? Oh, what did it do? Did it combine both of them together? This is new to me.
I like how it shows the little arrow up inside the actual pop-up, even though it's so tiny.
Yeah, it's so tiny. um, yeah, so okay, cool. So the pop-up itself is fine working. So it listened to the click and it's going to send a message now. And okay, it sent the message to the background JS. And here it's come up with the OAuth as the param type. And in the next one, I'll send back a response, which will come back to the pop-up JS. So we have this message passing kind of setup, and it'll have the response which says, I don't have OAuth yet. Yeah, so that works, which is pretty cool. Uh, it took me a
Awesome.
few tries to get this working, but now I have it.
You make it look easy,
Okay.
but I could understand that in
Yeah,
debugging it,
yeah,
it can be.
yeah. It was really a little bit like to get back the response. I initially thought like the API would be something like I send a message and then I have to send a message back. And sending a message back was complex because then I had to identify which tab my extension is running on and all of that. Because by in isolation, if you have to send a message from background to the extension in your tab, you have to identify which tab you're on and do you have access to that
Mm,
tab and so on.
interesting.
But this send response callback was much more convenient, I thought, and it took me a while to like find out how the callback itself works, especially with all the parameter mix-ups and stuff. uh, yeah, which I still don't have a clear answer to, like why is it the third parameter and not the second parameter.
Right.
But yeah, that's what we're working with. So okay, let's go to the next step with this. Since we have only 30 minutes, I'd like to get the OAuth at least working here.
Sounds good.
um, so I have a Slack. So okay, so we have our message passing working and stuff. What we want to do now is when I send a message to the background to say go login, I wanted to launch the whole OAuth flow, which I couldn't show you earlier. Maybe it'll miraculously work now, and we'll be able to see it. So for that, we need to go into Slack API. So this is a whole other like box of worms, which has its own quirks and I guess it is standard somehow. Uh, yeah, but I found I had to work through a lot of things here also. So what do you do for any? So technically, what we're building is a Slack. Not a bot, but a Slack app. It's called a user app. Um, yeah, so you use it as on behalf of the user. So it's not a bot that kind of spams you in your Slack, but you use it outside of Slack and you use it on behalf of the user. So that's why you need the login from the user, right? So that you can make API calls on behalf of the user. So anything that you want to start with in Slack, you need to create a Slack app. So what I've done here, so I have a bunch of apps. Let me see if I can show them. Yeah, I have a bunch of apps here, and I was trying out this thing only. And you can create a new app from scratch, and it'll basically it's a very simple process. It'll basically result in the same kind of app here, and it'll have a bunch of things. It'll have credentials and all of that. So there's secrets that you need to keep, and you can change icons. I don't know exactly. So the app itself, it works pretty well. It's easy to add to free instances of Slack. So free instances of Slack are restricted to about 10 apps, and they are anybody who's invited to the Slack instance can add an app there. But most of your corporate instances, you will have to get the admin to add your app
Mm,
into the
right.
instance. So I am working my app to become good enough that I can add it in my at my work and then dog food it among my colleagues. So that's my plan at least.
Nice.
So yeah, so you need to follow all these guidelines to make it a proper app that you can distribute.
But the nice
So
thing is you
here,
can create a free workspace and test as you'd like.
yeah. That's what I've been doing. So yeah. So then, yeah, here there's tons of features you can do with Slack apps. Like there's so much webhooks and commands and bots and all of that. They don't really differentiate between all those things. So I had to figure out that I need these OAuth permissions, and it's created this token and stuff because I've used it once before, and this was for the sample app that I built. My mouse is really acting up. Hmm. Um, is this accessible? Um, okay, that's connected. Okay, so let me remove this because that's not the redirect URL that we need. Okay, so we have the Slack app here. Now we need to launch a web auth flow. That's what like Chrome extension calls it, and that was one of the most like challenging things I did with the Chrome extension, like to actually use it as a server that I can use to log in into Slack, which was a little bit complex. But let's see if I can break it down here. So OAuth is a standard protocol, open auth OAuth, where yeah, it's a two-factor kind of authentication. So the first factor is you provide your client authentication, the secret and the ID that we had in the app itself. And the second part is when the app responds to you with a code, you respond back with that code along with your client secret, so that for the second time when you reinforce this, your authentication and authorization is complete. So during authorization you need to provide the permissions that the user has to give to your app. So in this case I want to know some user info so that I can pull those. I want to know what else do I want to know? I want to know conversations because I want to pull messages, right? So I'm going to ask for those two things out of Slack, and basically launch a web auth flow is what they call in Chrome extension land. So I might copy some code here because I need to be able to create these URLs and all those things, which I don't want to do from scratch. So I have that ready. I might just pull that in if that's okay. Um, okay, so how do we start? In the popup JS, I don't have to do anything different. I just have to like listen to that click and then send to background JS. And it's here that I'll do the meat of the work for logging you into Slack. So how does this work? So Chrome extension has the Chrome object, like I showed before, but it has API called identity, which really like encapsulates tons of functions that you can use to to get anything relating to authorizations and stuff working, which I think is pretty handy. But this is not well documented at all. Uh, so here in identity, so to use chrome.identity itself, you need to go back to your manifest.json and give your app permissions. So these will again come up when you submit your Chrome extension to the web store. That unique double quotes identity. So this will show up as a permission for your user, and they can like revoke or whatever. I guess I don't know what will happen then. But yeah, you need to declare it specifically that you're going to be using identity permissions in here, and then only all of this will work. Else it'll just keep erroring out, which I found out uh, through experimentation. So the function I'm going to use here is called launch web auth flow. So this launch web auth flow. Yeah. So this is basically the main thing that will launch an interactive kind of it's so what it does is it launches this browser window, which is so custom little browser window which doesn't have like minimize button on it and all. I hope you will see that now when we test this. And it also, I think what it does is it creates a little server also on its end, because it is able to receive a request from Slack. So the first step is kind of to send your first request, then you kind of receive from Slack, so that Slack knows that this is the same person that is sending me the request in the two handshake kind of thing. There are various resources you can use to learn about OAuth, and it is complex and it's not something everybody does every day. uh, but yeah, we'll say that it has two steps, and both of those steps are kind of performed by this launch by flow function, and it was really interesting, I thought. So launch by flow takes two parameters again. So first one's an object and the second one is a function. So we'll be using both of those. So in the first one, what it needs is it needs a URL. So to send its first request to. And this is the part where I'm going to copy. I'm going to copy a bunch of like Slack related stuff here. I don't want to be writing this. It was very fiddly to write them and stuff.
No worries.
So yeah, so I'm going to be exposing this. I will change the secret immediately after after this show. Uh,
I was
but
going to ask you after if you needed me to blur it out.
yeah. Uh, so basically, it would be nice to send these. So when I commit this to a GitHub repo, I will not be hard coding this. I'll pull it out of an environment file, and if you want to try it out, you would have to create your own Slack app and get these two details from the Slack app and use them. Uh, yeah, they're pretty important. So now this permissions I want are these permissions. I want to be able to read channels, I want to be able to read message history, and I want to read user info. uh, so I what I created is basically Slack utils, two Slack utils here to get the first OAuth URL and then the OAuth access URL here. So one thing that I want to show is this identity redirect URL. So this is the kind of little server that the Chrome extension waits upon. And we also will need to add this redirect URL in the Slack app itself. So that's where your question comes in, Colby. Like when I upload this Chrome extension to the web store, does that change? Does that ID change or not? Because this redirect URL is completely based on that ID. So in the URL here, I'll send the Slack utils dot get OAuth URL. So that's the first one I need to send. And there is another parameter that I need to give here, interactive true. I don't know what will happen if I don't give interactive true. Like, how will it wait for my permission? I think it'll just error.
Yeah.
So once that happens, now Slack will see that, okay, Slack will read that client ID, client secret, the client ID that I have embedded in here while creating this URL. And it'll come back to the redirect URL. It'll hit the redirect URL with a new code. So I'll call that code URL, I think, here.
And just a heads up, I'm not sure if you heard it, but we have 15 minutes remaining.
Oh, wow. Okay, the pressure. um, okay, so the in the code URL, so the code URL comes back, and what I'll do is I'll basically split it up, look for the code, and create the next step for the second handshake of the OAuth that I've been talking about. And there I'll send my secret also. See, the first time I didn't send the secret, so I'll send the secret and the code itself, which kind of like fulfills the two-factor thing that's needed. So what I'll have to do here is I have to fetch on this URL, get OAuth access URL, the second one. I'll provide it the URL that I found there. Then this is pretty much like standard fetch. It'll give me back a response, and I'll have to like get the JSON from that, and then in the JSON. So now here is what we can like. I can console log it, and we can test it. Here I'll use the callback to send it back to the pop-up. So that I can show, right, that this is logged into Egghead, and I don't have to show that, so that I can do that conditional on the button there. I also will have to do other things like store it and stuff. So, but send response. But this part was a little tricky to me. It is there in the documentation as well. So this is not, this is an asynchronous event that's happening here, right? So launch web auth flow, it's going into a whole new flow, and it gets back, and then another fetch and stuff. And the send response has to wait until then. So the trick to get that working is just to return true from the method. So once you return true, this is something completely Chrome extension thingy. On message in a listener, if you return true, then it knows that it's an async send response. It'll wait for an async send response.
Interesting.
So okay, so we have all of this set up. Let's try to see if it works. We have only like 10 minutes. Oh no. So. Okay, it reloaded fine. Now let's see if that works. So log into Slack, please. No, do I? Okay, let me. Oh yeah. See, that's what it didn't happen that time. Uh, so okay, so this is like a pop-up that comes up where it's supposed to like show things and stuff, but the redirect URI did not match. Like I said, you need to provide this. Why can't I select things on this? Okay. So like I said, you need to provide the redirect URL inside Slack itself. Why won't it let me select? Okay. So you need to provide this redirect URL there. And my god, my mouse is all screwed up. I think I have to charge my mouse. um,
The things you don't think about, right?
Yeah. Oh my god. And it's useless when I charging it. Okay, let me copy it and out of the screen. Sorry. And so here, I have it open here somewhere. So in the redirect URL, I have to add this URL here, add it, save URL. So this tells Slack that such a thing is waiting for it whenever I.
That it's safe to send back to.
Yeah. So okay.
And I don't know if you hear that music, but we're 10 minutes left.
We're almost done. This is gonna work. This is gonna work now. So I don't have any loading state here, so we'll just like cross our fingers and wait for the pop-up to come. Okay. So this is what that didn't show up. So we have such a pop-up come up, right? So since I'm only logged into Egghead's workspace, otherwise, it basically shows a small drop down here with all the other Slack workspaces that you want to log into. And this is all the user info I asked of in the message itself. So this is the first auth URL that's working. So I can say allow here. And I don't have the log opened. Oh yeah, but it did.
You got an object, yay!
Yeah, I got an object, and it has all.
There you are.
This gives me so much joy every time.
Nice.
So I have the egghead IO here, Man, this took like weeks for me to get it working, right? Now I can do it so easily.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, it was a very finicky, but to get
Yeah.
OAuth working in a Chrome extension was big for me at least. So yeah, this is all it needs. So this is the access token. So the next steps are basically to store this token, and every time you encounter a URL, like I showed here, what it does is it goes to the it asks your extension to send an API call again from that background JS to the Slack API and get back. And during that time, it uses that token that we'll store within our extension. And without that token, it won't be able to make any of these calls. I can show a bit of the code of the rest of my extension so that we can see how everything works. Let me
Yeah, I
pull
think
that
that'd be cool.
out.
I think it'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see particularly like the front end, like how it does it actually look to add the tooltips, right?
Yeah. I'll show that. So this is my like final thing that I had. Let me see to fit here.
So I'll go ahead and stop the normal timer then,
Okay.
but we can,
Yeah.
yeah. But awesome
Yeah.
job so
I
far.
can.
So I'm excited to see this. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was what the code for the thing that I demoed was, where you saw the little pop up with Kent's message. Uh, so the next steps would have been. So what I couldn't show you in this R is basically the content script, right? So that required some work from my side. So in the manifest JSON, we have pretty much everything else. We had reached the identity part of it, and we had a service worker setup. We had the pop-up setup and all of that. But what we didn't have was the content script, and the content script is what gets loaded in the page itself. So the pop-up doesn't have any access to the page, the background doesn't have any access to your tab and page. It's the content script that will have, which I didn't get around to getting to work. So what happens is your background goes through the launch web auth flow. It gets back all of the data. It sends the response, and we got it here in the response. So I have pretty much. So I have the same, like you can see, there's the click button, and it sends the message. And in the response, what I do is I store it in Chrome storage local. So this is like the most important part, I think. So once I store it here, it's now available again everywhere, like with the other Chrome API. So I can use it in pop-up or background or anywhere. And I have other logic around here to like get the thing and don't show the button if I already have it logged in and stuff like that. For the UI itself, that is the content script, I set up a little Webpack thingy to because I needed more sophisticated JavaScript. Basically, I
Yeah.
needed to import stuff and things like that. It's pretty messy, but this is what works right now. So I have a bit of utils. So I'm using this library called tippy.js, which is pretty powerful. It's a JavaScript only library. I haven't used React or anything, but I am planning to move this to Preact so that I can have a bit of like templates going on
Interesting. Yeah.
uh, for different kind of Slack data that I get. So basically, what I do is whenever so this piece of code here converts to this content script inside the extension. So I have a little Webpack thingy that takes the main JS as entry and converts it into content script here. So in this main JS, what I do is whenever there is a mouse over, ideally this should be focus, but this is what this is not the final version. So whenever I mouse over, I find out if it is a link, and if it's a link, that's slack.com, and the link will basically look like this. So this is a permalink here. So I keep this to refer to whenever whenever I'm in doubt. So then I break down the link and I send. So again, I send message to the background with all the details in the link. The background again makes the API calls that I need somewhere here. So this is so again that's where this param thing comes in use. So I have this whole setup here where I fetch it from a netlify function that I have written. So this is the
Nice.
lambda function that I have written because your Chrome extension is not really a server, and you can get into nasty cost exceptions.
Hmm.
So what I did was I accessed the Slack API through a little netlify function that I have written here. Basically, yeah, it fetches so export something something web client. That's so client conversation history is what I try to get. So that's deployed and all of that, and
Yeah.
I can use it locally also. So I use background JS to basically fetch that and send back the response to the content script here. And in the content script, I figure out a lot of stuff to do with it. It's basically Slack has a way of sending back messages in blocks, and I figure out I insert the user wherever I want, and then I use Tippy uh, to target on that node. And this is the API to allow HTML inside of the tooltip itself. And then I
Mm.
set the content with right now I'm just showing name and text here. And that's what you saw like pop up in that black space. So yeah, that's basically all of the logic. I think there is the complexity. I think is mostly around like understanding the structure of the Slack API, whatever it returns, like how a
Right.
message looks. It looks different, like if there's a link in it, if there's an image in it, if it's a bot or if it's a yeah, and if it's a reply, if it's a thread, and so on. I think that'll be like the next complexity that I'm going to just sit and tackle. I'm going to probably put some Preact or something here so that I can have templates for all those use cases and stuff
Right. Right.
and get that working. So
It's
that's the next level of things.
it's interesting how much like complexity there is around like the configuration itself, like all the different
Right.
pieces of like the manifest and where those
Yeah.
things point
Yeah.
to. But it's definitely interesting, and I love the like you make it look like it's straightforward and easy, but it really does come together with a lot of complexity. So that's pretty
Yes.
awesome. I'll be looking
Yeah.
forward to an egghead course on it later.
Yes, I have like recorded. So that's why I was so
Nice.
smooth with this, right? I have
Okay.
recorded the whole OAuth flow, just like a couple of days back, and it's shaping up. To I have like 4 more lessons to record, and it should be
Nice.
up on
Nice.
Egghead like pretty much next week or so. I'm looking forward
Awesome.
to that.
Well, whoever's listening, make sure you check in on egghead.io and look up for that
Yeah,
course. But
yeah.
yeah,
I'll announce it on my Twitter. No worries.
sounds awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, PK, for joining, and thank you everybody in the chat who joined us today. Um, if you want to put back on that screen just for a minute, just because I have
Oh
my
no!
layout set up,
Oh no
it just looks a
no!
little. No worries, no, it just looks a little messy until then. The way that I have, I need to fix that. That's my fault. Anyways, thank you so much for coming on and accepting the challenge today for Colbyashi Maru.
Yeah.
Everybody, make sure to go check out PK on Twitter. It's at Kodmad, right?
Yeah, P Kodmad.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, the pun there is my name is Kodmad and my YouTube channel is Kodmad. So
There we
there's a
I
thing
love it.
going on there. I'm
I
still
love it.
building my brand, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I don't have much time for these things, but I am really passionate about like side projects and stuff. So I'm building. I'm trying to
That's
figure out
amazing.
something.
Well, everybody, make sure you go check her out on Twitter and YouTube and keep an eye out for that Egghead course.
Yes,
But
that's
next
right.
week, we'll have Jamin Ferguson, who will face off against building Pac Man with vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, PK, any last words before we sign off?
No, this was a lot of fun. That was a nice little demo I was able to give. I hope somebody got some use out of it, or you can look back and like try to understand this. Contact me, like if you're writing a Chrome extension. I have this all very fresh in my head, and I can help you out. And yeah, follow me on Twitter. I just tweet random stuff there, mostly tech stuff.
Awesome. So awesome. Sounds great. Well, thanks again, everybody. And this is Colby signing off.